wanted to start with was just a little bit about the philosophy of survey research, or at least the philosophy of what I'll be talking about today. And when we talk about survey research, it's a branch of social science, but I guess not all social scientists sort of agree on exactly how we should go about approaching studying things. So when we talk about survey research, we're making an assumption that there's some objective reality that exists that we can measure. So we wouldn't be approaching our research topic with the perspective that things are relative and that well, we would definitely acknowledge that it's context specific, but we're saying there's something objective out there that we can measure. Likewise, we would also be interested in uncovering laws that guide behavior, as opposed to social scientists who might be more on the relative end of the spectrum, where they would say that there's not universal laws that guide behavior. Someone who's conducting survey research, or the reason for doing a survey, is that you believe that there are some laws that exist, laws of behavior that exist. As such, if you're conducting a survey, then you'd be taking the role that taking the perspective that your role is to measure this reality or discover these laws of behavior. And so we'd be looking towards positivistic or positivism in terms of how we would evaluate our results. And then as such, if you're doing survey research, then you'd be concerned with things such as reliability of your measures, the validity of your results, representation of your results, and then generalizability. So following the scientific method associated with positivism. And this is, I'll talk briefly about different types of survey research, and we'll go into these different topics of reliability and validity and representation. So there's a couple different uses of survey research, or types of survey research that we might conduct. And I'll put some examples up on the slide where I just talk about some of the different types of survey research, and then I'll have some examples on the next slide. So we might conduct a survey where it would be descriptive in nature. And that's where we'd be simply describing characteristics and behaviors of a population of interest. We might conduct a study to be exploratory in nature. So we might be using this type of study if there's some topic that we're interested in studying. Let's say we want to know a little bit more about what the population thinks, that kind of fall underneath this exploratory type of study. Or if we're developing and testing a methodology. And finally, we can think about explanatory studies. And with this type of survey research, we'd be attempting to understand why things occur, identify the causes of things that we're observing, and determine relationship among constructs and variables. So for descriptive study, with this type of research, we're just asking a question of sort of what is out there. So maybe we're looking at the amount of animals that are harvested in a particular region. We just want to know the amount that's harvested. Or perhaps we're looking at a sharing network. If we're not trying to understand factors that determine the sharing network or antecedents of the sharing network, would fall under descriptive study. We're just kind of saying this is what the network is. Or perhaps if we're trying to understand how many people use a certain recreation area, it's just descriptive. So the census, for example, it's a descriptive study. It's just saying, you know, what are the characteristics of the population. exploratory studies, they might often be used, or they're often used if we are, let's say we're doing an attitudinal survey. We want to know attitudes towards certain policy with respect to greenhouse gas emissions. Part of that process, we might want to know what people think would be an outcome of that. So as a researcher, we might have some idea of what outcomes might be, but we want to survey the general public, we want to know what they think the outcomes might be. So let's say we're going to do a large scale survey of, let's say, 1,000 people. Maybe before we develop that survey, we would conduct a smaller sample of 50 people or 60 people and ask them what they think the outcomes of some sort of policy might be. We would then take that information and use it to construct our survey that we send out to a larger population. So it's exploratory because we're just trying to get a sense for what people think. We're exploring the issue basically, as the name suggests. Or if we're doing a pilot test of a survey where we want to see if our methods would work, or maybe try to develop methods to conduct a survey. That falls under this exploratory issue. And finally, explanatory studies. Here we're developing theory, we're testing theory, trying to understand relationships or what factors might be causing certain behavior. So I have sharing networks down here again. So when I said it could be a descriptive study, we were just saying this would be the sharing network, or this is the network that exists. If we're trying to understand maybe factors that would lead to more or less sharing, then it's falling underneath an explanatory study, because we're trying to explain behavior. We have some theory about what would influence a sharing network, and we're trying to explain that kind of test theory. Another example of an explanatory study, there's some researchers who, well, I guess in psychology there's a concept of value orientation. The slide that talks about this a little bit. This is supposed to guide behavior, sort of a cognitive hierarchy that guides behaviors. So people have developed these orientations towards wildlife with the thought that that could explain support or opposition to certain wildlife policies. So it's an idea of trying to explain people's behavior. And this relies on theory and test hypotheses. And just to make this a little, provide one more example here. So if we would look at the issue of predator control, a descriptive study might ask a simple question. We could survey the population of the Fairbanks North Star Borough. We just ask a simple question: do you support or oppose aerial shooting of wolves? Simple question. We could represent a population of interest with that. We come back with some results that describe the population. If we were doing a attitudinal study related to predator control, we might survey a small sample of the population and ask them what outcomes would result if aerial shooting of wolves continues or is halted. And then we could use this as an input into a larger study. This is often called the elicitation study, especially if you look at attitude research, the theory of reasoned action by Fishbein and Eisen. They'd say that the elicitation study is the first step of conducting an attitude, well, early step of conducting an attitude survey. So we could contrast this onto an explanatory study. So we might view one aspect of predator control as sort of a larger set of behaviors that might relate to wildlife. So for example, we might have someone's attitude towards aerial shooting, and whether they'll support or oppose that, whether they'll participate in trapping or support or oppose that, if they're be likely to hunt, if they would support buffer zones around parks to protect the population of wolves. So we have all these behaviors that relate to, in this case, wildlife.